Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about Drobo NAS, the pros, the cons, and is that a NAS brand that you need to be looking at this year? Now, Drobo is a NAS brand that has been around for a long time, and by long time I am talking 10, I think even 12 or 15 years. And Drobo NAS seems to be one of those units that is always mentioned, yet they must have produced less than 10 units in terms of NAS in all of that time. Despite that, they still have an incredible following with photo video editors, and also because they have a popular Thunderbolt series of devices that really carry things forward. Their ISP has always been simple. They want to produce a NAS or DAS storage system that is incredibly user-friendly, intuitive, and no hassle. Even they think even a completely unexperienced IT noob will be able to just plug it in and be using it within 5 to 10 minutes. And fair play to them, they are right. It is still one of the most user-friendly platforms out there. It is definitely not in the top 3, in my opinion, and the opinion of most people. What you get is they are more expensive than most NAS devices, and they have got extra little features and software and hardware that we'll talk about later in the video, but for the most part, they are still considered a content creator NAS and a NAS for working professionals. Home users won't really get the features and functionality that modern NAS is equipped to do these days. There's a few nods towards it in the later releases of NASes, such as the 5N2, but for the most part, NAS is about business and it's about content creators. Now, let's talk about Drobo NAS. The majority of Drobo NASes have relatively modest internal hardware. A lot of ARM-based CPUs, Realtek CPUs, and I think there is one out there that's got an Intel, that 8-bay. But even the 8-bay is not incredibly old, that's a bit mean, but it's definitely older than most of the 8-bays that have been released in the last few years. There's a 5-bay that's got an M2 SSD cache port built into the bottom that lets you have greater assisted read and write speeds thanks to installing that. On top of that, Drobo has a fantastic RAID system in the form of Beyond RAID. And what that means in real terms is the traditional RAID systems, and for those that aren't aware, for 2 drives you can have a RAID 0 or a RAID 1, and a RAID 0 is when all your drives are combined, and then if you filled it with so many drives you've got a huge pool of storage, but if one drive dies you lose it all. RAID 1 is when you've got 2 drives mirroring one another, and therefore you've always got an exact duplicate of your data, half your capacity, but if one drive dies, all your data is safe. And then there's RAID 5, RAID 6 and stuff like that, where you have 1 or 2 disks worth of redundancy that you can lose, but the read and write can lose some speed as the calculation for that redundancy is made with something called parity. Do check out my RAID video. But Drobo arrives with something called Beyond RAID, and what it promises is several things. One, it promises that the drives inside can be mixed and matched. You can use any brand, any speed, any capacity, put them into the Drobo. So you could have a WD 500 gig with a Seagate 1 TB, with an HGST 2 TB, with a Toshiba 8 TB drive, and pop them all in. And Beyond RAID will create the best possible RAID configuration available and give you the best capacity. Normal RAID would class every drive as the smallest drive, say that 500 gig WD, and it would only see 4 WDs. Beyond RAID will see all of that capacity and create the best capacity possible while still maintaining a drive's worth of RAID redundancy. So it is a great little system and feature there. And also, failure, normally in a RAID array, when you've got multiple drives and a drive dies and you remove that drive, your read and write speeds will dip from around 90 to 100 megs per second down to about 8 to 10 megabits per second. Now, with a NAS, that means it's still working, but the system is using that parity that's been created to protect your drives to try to read and write the data, and it takes a very long time. Beyond RAID, if a drive fails, the device will give you 25 to 35 megabits per second read and write, and then you introduce a new drive, it rebuilds itself much, much quicker than other RAID-enabled NAS systems. Now, this brings us back to content creation and the people that use Drobo right now. Because if you cannot, you can't risk losing your data and losing access to your data for any length of time, minutes, hours, days or months, Drobo is definitely going to be appealing to you because of that beyond RAID system. But it's more than that. Because not only is the RAID proprietary and built automatically and maintained by the Drobo itself, but on top of that, a number of new Drobos arrive with an internal battery. Now, we tested it on the other YouTube channel, and what it meant in real terms is if you pulled the power cable or out the back of the Drobo, or it just your PSU failed, there was a battery inside that would continue to run the Drobo. And what it would do is the Drobo would go, oh, there's a problem, and then slowly shut itself down. It would eventually just shut itself down and protect your data from read-write failure. Now, if there's a problem or if the power cable has been removed, you can obviously introduce a new one. Or if you've purchased a new PSU, which I recommend any Drobo user to do, and you have it lying around, you can introduce this new PSU before the unit powers itself down by going into the settings and saying don't power yourself down for a certain length of time, and therefore your Drobo will have high availability, which is great. Otherwise, that battery is great for stopping read and write failures by flushing the cache and making sure that there is no lost data or broken data read onto that NAS. Now, things like link aggregation are possible on the latest generations of Drobo NASs with dual ports on the rear that support both link aggregation and load balancing, which also mean you don't need to have a link aggregation enabled switch. The Drobo has 2 ports, and even if you are using a dumb switch or a dumb router that doesn't support link aggregation, the Drobo will take care of it for you, and it will work out on its own how to run link aggregation on those 2 ports. It will appropriate the 2 ports, and using a system of load balancing, which means data is sent one lane after the other, enable the ability to use both those LAN ports on the rear. Also, Drobos are the best looking NASs by far. They look slick. They've got these LED lights on the front that are more than just pretty. A lot of them correspond to different actions happening within the device. And on the front panel, which is magnetized that you pull off, on the inside it details exactly what those LED lights do. And there's about 12 or 15 different variations that if your Drobo's doing something, you can lift the panel, look at that, and then you know what the device is doing with an LCD panel and a lovely blue light at the bottom of the device that as your Drobo fills up, the lights fill up to tell you how much storage is available on your NAS. And that's a great amount of knowledge just by glancing at a device that's running. Now, it's not all good. There are downsides, unfortunately. The first downside of Drobo, to me, is the price. It's one of the most expensive for its hardware out there. And although you can use a Drobo as a Plex media server as well as an Apple Time Machine backup and for general shared storage, there's still no denying that the hardware inside is less than that of other NAS brands, and you're not going to be able to use transcoding on a Drobo for things like Plex Media Server of 1080p or 4K. 4K is off the table when it comes to multimedia transcoding on this device. It plays 4K, but it's not going to transcode it. On top of that, the Drobo range of devices are released so infrequently that, I mean, the last Drobo NAS was available for, I think, close to 8 years it was available before they released a follow-up. So it's insane to have a release cycle like that, that if you buy a Drobo now, you should really double check about the release date, because the 5N2 was released, I think, just under 2 years ago, and I don't think we're going to see a follow-up to this side of 2020. So do bear that in mind when you do buy a Drobo NAS, to try to get one close to the new release schedule. They've got an 8-bay that's been around for donkey's years and we're still waiting for it to be replaced. So right now, buying a Drobo 8-bay may be a negative investment until we find out more about a new release. And that's the main reason that they always have difficulty holding on to the 3rd spot of the NAS podium, because their hardware just isn't released frequently enough. I'm not saying they have to release a unit every year and saturate the market with their product, but for God's sake, you can release a little more than you are. And although they have that great beyond RAID system, great link aggregation and load balancing support internal of the NAS, and that internal battery, which makes them a great device in terms of RAID rebuild and RAID support and read and write integrity, it's still, to me, not enough to justify the hefty price tag. But nevertheless, they are a great NAS brand out there for content creators. If any of the stuff I've talked about appeals to you, good news, it's not available on any other NAS brand. So if you want that internal battery, they're the pretty much go-to guides with a couple of exceptions. The same with that link aggregation automatic switch inside and the SSD cache built into the bottom. A lot of Drobo NASs arrive with an SSD pre-populated, so do check the descriptions because some of them arrive with an SSD already pre-installed for you. But that has been Drobo NAS. I hope this has helped you. If you've enjoyed this, chuck me a like, or let me know in the comments about anything I've missed. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.